Welcome to AI Industry Discussions. In this vlog, we discuss AI and the implications of AI with leading experts in different industries. Topics such as AI maturity, data, the organization around AI, and industry-specific use cases and trends are what we'll be covering. Today, we have two fantastic guests. It's Linn Alfredsson, Associate at Snellman Law Firm, and Ebba Josefson Lindqvist, Project Manager for the Data Factory at AI Innovation of Sweden. And today, we'll be talking about AI in the legal industry. So, warm welcome, Linn and Ebba. Tell me, who are you and what do you do? Who wants to go first?
Ebba, do you want to start? All right, I'll start. Thank you for that introduction. My name is Ebba Josefson Lindqvist, based in Gothenburg and representing the West Coast today with some jellyfish on my dress. And I work here at AI Innovation of Sweden, as you mentioned. And I am actually pretty recently that I started in March. And before that, I was, after my law degree that I took here in Gothenburg, I was doing court practice at the District Court of Gothenburg, so I have some experience from that. After that, I went to California, to Sacramento, and worked for a law firm with establishing Scandinavian companies, mainly in the US, for 1.5 years. That was a great experience, very close to Silicon Valley and San Francisco, and there I got bit by the bug with the startup community and everything. So when I eventually got back home, I kept being involved in the startup community, also with an organization called Silicon Vikings that I'm running here in Gothenburg. It's a Nordic and Silicon Valley-based organization. And I worked for a law firm at some time here in Gothenburg. After that, I went to a legal tech startup called Precisely. And after that, I transitioned to AI Innovation of Sweden. And as you mentioned, I'm project manager of the Data Factory, which basically is the infrastructure with compute and storage for AI projects, but it's also including everything from having data sets available for AI projects, the knowledge shared on setting up these data factory solutions, and also the legal knowledge on how can you share data sets, etc. And with the relation to AI and difficulties that we can see there. And it's really work in progress. So we are tackling all of these questions throughout as we go along and move forward. So it's a very exciting position that I'm in right now. And yep, looking forward to this conversation.
All right, super exciting. And we'll talk more about the Data Factory. I think both me and Linn are super excited to hear more about all things.
I'll take over. Yeah. So my name is Linn Alfredsson, and I'm an associate at Snellman Law Firm here in Stockholm. And Snellman is a Nordic law firm with offices in both Finland and Sweden. And I'm based in the Swedish office. Prior to joining the law firm life, I was an in-house counsel at H&M here in Stockholm as well. And I also got bit by the bug, I want to say, when I actually lived in San Francisco. So I have a law degree both from Sweden and one from Berkeley, UC Berkeley, just outside San Francisco. Lived there for about 1.5 years. And when I moved back, I couldn't not work with tech. So what I do today is mainly focused on tech and legal tech. And I love it. So I'm looking forward to hear more about the Data Factory and talking about AI with you guys today.
All right, so nice to have you both here. So legal tech, I mean, you've both been bitten by the bug. So how would you define legal tech?
So, Lynn, you go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I would say that legal tech for me, in my experience, is everything where you can merge law and technology. Sometimes we say legal tech, sometimes we say law and technology. For me, these two are kind of interchangeable. And we can see a lot of legal tech startups growing, especially, I would say, in the Nordics and in Sweden right now. So I would kind of define it as where you can apply tech within the legal industry, basically.
I agree with that, if I may. some say maybe that's a too broad definition and want to narrow it down, but I think also that including everything from contract management to language models, for example, for legal language, everything could fit into that. So it's a very broad term, but I think we could squeeze a lot of things into that. It's kind of the same as with fintech, right? Some of these areas may overlap, but it's still, it's hard to set one thing is legal tech and one thing is not.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I like the broader definition as we can fit and merge a lot of things into that space. On the other hand, I also understand if people want to narrow it down in some way. But I feel like we get so much more interaction and so much more interesting conversation if we just use the broader perspective today here. So hopefully that's what we can do.
So
and also, sorry for interrupting again, but as the legal tech is actually a little bit behind, for example, fintech, if we narrow it down too much, there may not be too many actors to talk about or to find. So I also like the broader concept, include all of these ideas, and the concepts may be so different anyways. So they take different roles in this ecosystem of legal tech.
Yeah. So for someone not within the legal industry, legal tech would seem like something new. But is it? I mean, how long has the term legal tech been around in all these hot startups? When did it all start?
Well, I don't really know. For me, my eye opener was when I moved back from the States, and that's a couple of years ago now. Then we were just starting here in Stockholm, at least, to get some legal tech. We have some contract management tools and stuff like that. We have, for example, Precisely, that's a Gothenburg-based startup. We also have Donna Legal. We have VQ Legal. However, VQ Legal is one of those that's been around for about 10 years or something.
Yes.
So those are, old school. However, we can see that it's emerging a lot of newer companies, I would say. So I would say a couple of years ago, it really started to boom more here in Sweden and the Nordics. I don't know, Ebba, if you agree or if you have another take on this.
No, I do agree, and I think
actually
that
we
VQ Forum, for example, that you mentioned, they've been in this for 10 years, but it wasn't called legal tech at the time. So I think that's the big change. Maybe a couple of years ago, or even just 2 or 3 years ago, we started.
Ebba.
Yes, I can hear you, but
yeah, because I can hear you. Björn cannot hear you though.
No, I can't hear you.
I can hear Ebba.
Oh, no. All right.
Okay, are we good to go?
Okay. We're good to go.
Yep.
So,
okay.
So I was just saying about the legal tech. I think maybe 2-3 years ago, we really started about legal tech as a concept in Sweden. And I would say also that the US was probably a few years ahead of us with using the term and having a couple of startups and law firms looking into going digital and offering services in a different way than we have started to do in Sweden. Maybe it's kind of starting off right now or 1 or 2 years ago, but I would say that definitely the US was a bit ahead of us in this.
Right.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely. The US is a few years, I think, ahead of us in a lot of ways. Even when we're talking about legal tech education, the startup field is just amazing over there. And in other terms, I mean, when we compare ourselves, the legal industry to the fintech industry, I heard some statistics about that we would be approximately a couple of years after them in everything we do. And I think that fits quite good in with fintech versus legal tech as well. You can see that the fintech industry has boomed a couple of years ago or a few years back. And now we actually have very established companies such as Klarna, iSettle, and a few others. I think this is the direction that we're, looking at for legal tech as well. I just don't know if our industry is really ready for this transformation yet. What do you think, Ebba?
Yes, I think you're touching on something really interesting there. And just to mention another company which is in this field is Seal Software, and they're also a partner of AI Innovation of Sweden, and they just got acquired by DocuSign which is pretty amazing because it's actually, they have their AI department in Gothenburg, and that they're keeping that department still here. So I think that's a very interesting, that company working with AI in the legal tech scene, and actually being acquired by one of the big super startups from the US and keeping that development over here. I think that's a very interesting transition to see, okay, what's happening in this field, and we are actually very advanced in some parts of it. So even the US is looking globally to find, the hotspots and the really good companies within these fields. So that's an interesting transition that is kind of happening right now.
So given the sort of the analogy to fintech, that would mean like in a couple of years or 3 years, we would have maybe not mainstream adoption, but at least a wider adoption of legal tech within Sweden as well. So what are the hot stuff? What's cooking in legal tech right now in Sweden and in other parts of the world? So, Lynn, you want to go first?
Oh, what's cooking? That's a broad question. I don't really know where to start here. I mean, obviously we have the contract management tools, such as, all of these generating, more efficiently AI tools, I would say. There's also a lot of tools being tested now for due diligence processes, for example, in M&A transactions. However, I feel like the tools, at least the tools that we've been trying out in my law firm, is not yet there to be as helpful as we would need them to be and as precise. So I'm still looking for, that one tool that can be this amazing one in terms of a lot of documents and processing that and actually getting the result that we need. There's a lot of tools out there, but we also have to, try and see what fits the organization and whatnot. So I would say a lot of contract tools, a lot of contract reviewing tools. This is an example of Donna Legal, for example. And we also see a lot of, digital transformation, not only for companies and law firms, we also see them in the court on the, on the court side. More so, digital conferences are acceptable, and so on. So I think we will see some more tools growing, but I would say a lot of tools are not really there yet. I'm still looking for, the edge for tools to get even better. What do you think, Ebba?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also think there's a bit of an hesitant approach to using technology. I mean, the legal field or the legal industry is not really famous for being innovative and progressive. It's rather kind of traditional. So it's a little bit of a hesitation with taking in new tools and using that. And I know, for example, the Advokatsamfundet, they are trying to, help the law firms to digitize and give some guidelines, but it's taken a little bit of time. And I think sometimes the court system, for example, is more progressive, which would be kind of surprising. So I think that's an interesting field to see. And just going back to your question there, Björn, on what's cooking right now, I think also the contract management, for example, where you have tasks that you can really make more efficient, for example. That's something that we see a lot of progression in. And then, of course, there are some sides of law where it's harder to, automate the process. So I think we will see like the simpler tasks definitely being automated and finding useful tools earlier on. And then also legal advice in a digital way is something that is really up and coming, where law firms are trying to be more accessible for their clients, for example, and finding new customers in finding other ways than the traditional way of getting paid, maybe doing law as a service, for example. So I can see how that's changing a bit.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, you have this new generation of sort of digital natives who are used to consuming services from all around the world, no matter where they are. And the traditional sort of a lawyer in a suit in an office might not sort of work for them in that case. So what are we looking at ahead? I mean, in a couple of 3 or 4 or 5 years, Lynn, you said you were looking for that tool that would fix
The
everything.
edge, yeah, definitely. I'm scouting. Whenever I don't travel so much anymore due to COVID, obviously, but whenever I travel, I try to meet up with startups and companies just to discuss, where is legal tech here and how do you see this evolving. I definitely see on the court side that they're going through a major transformation right now. I think we will see a lot of new tools and digitalization in terms of how we take a deposition and how we actually have a hearing and all of that stuff. Other than that, I feel like a lot of law firms, as Ebba said, they're more hesitant to try new things. But I think we've seen, actually due to COVID, a major change in just the mentality and the mindset we need to try new things and to challenge the industry in a kind of a new way. So I think we will develop a lot of new tools 3 to 5 years from now. I think we will be looking at a totally different legal workplace and legal market.
Yeah. So what do we need to do to get there, to develop those new tools? What are the sort of obstacles and challenges of today? Ebba, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I was touching on the mindset before, and I think that's actually one of the major issues that we need to kind of start changing a bit, and the incentives of why to use these tools and what you can do with it. And then we were saying that the courts, for example, they don't have the incentive of earning any money. They actually need to make their process as effective as possible because they always have a backlog of cases coming in. So they have a different incentive of implementing, for example, some AI solution, whereas law firms have their way of traditionally charging their clients, and now they meet a requirement from the clients to find different ways to get paid, or how you can pay as law as a service, for example. And I think that's part of the transition. Like when the law firms realize that it's actually beneficial for them as well to use these tools to make their work effective, and it's not going to take away the work. It's just going to open up for these really hard and difficult legal questions that every lawyer really wants to dig into, really, instead of doing the repetitive work. I think that's that mindset is changing. We, for example, have a law firm just joined us as a partner, Max Law Firm, because they are very interested in seeing, okay, how can they use AI? And they may not have all of that knowledge themselves, but they can see how working with other partners, they can find ways of introducing AI into their own business. And seeing more of that, I think, is really one way. And then, of course, the research that lawyers do, for example, if we can find tools that would really make that more efficient. Usually it's the associates who do all that work, and if we can make that much more efficient, I think that's a great tool that we can have. Of course, there are tools today, but have that overall picture of all the case law that exists, and to help you sort out the most specific cases, for example, something like that.
So that's
I mean, that would be great just to add on to that research tool. That would be amazing, I think. Even, trainees do a lot of research, and what we see is that it's very, very time consuming. So just to make that process more efficient would take a lot of hours off, I think, where we can actually focus on other things. And I think, as Ebba touched upon, the billable hour, we will see a shift here. We can already see today that they're popping up new kind of legal services platforms that offer more packaged solutions. In Sweden, we have something called Pocket Law, which is one example. They offer their services to, I think, mostly in-house lawyers and legal teams, and not so much, doing transactions and stuff like that. But it's a lot of interesting new in terms of packaging what you actually offer your clients, the offering. So I think we will see a change there as well, definitely.
So this research tool that everybody seems to want, from a sort of me being outside this world, is basically massive text analysis, crunching a lot of data, documents, trying to find data and summarize data and put it in sort of digestible format.
Yes.
And also finding the key things. Usually you're looking for a specific definition, a principle, how something is interpreted in the case law and referendums and stuff like that. So it's very specific what we're looking for usually. So that would be great. I just don't know the tool that does that precisely yet.
I think that's sort of the key there, that precisely, because in theory there are techniques that can do this, but I assume they're maybe too blunt.
Yeah, and I think in terms of when I've been trying out tools that does this kind of research, it's never the thing I'm actually looking for. I get a lot of text and I get a lot of, I guess combined texts and stuff like that. But it's never actually the little detail that I'm looking for. So I think the more precise a tool could be, and obviously this takes training. This takes very specific data. This takes data that we know that we want going forward. And the quality of data combined with the quantity we need of data, I just don't think that lawyers actually, or the legal industry actually has put in the work to make those tools that are out there that precise, because it takes a lot of time and effort. And I think the lawyers that really, realize this and how this can be efficient in a long-term sense, they will stay very, very competitive in the market going forward.
Yeah. So basically, sort of what you would need is the combination of awesome technology and a huge data set of sort of relevant texts that are both high in quality and high in quantity. And then this, in theory, would be doable. And speaking on data, Ebba, I mean, AI Innovation in Sweden and the Data Factory.
Yes.
I mean, you are doing something sort of to push this forward.
Exactly. That's a part of what the Data Factory will be. We are trying to build a library with data sets that is suitable for AI projects. And then, so we have, for example, the Road Data Lab, where we are collecting, or that project is collecting data from roads. We have the Space Data Lab, for example, looking at different space data. We have different healthcare projects running, where we are looking into if we can, in one way or the other, share data, or whether data can be used, at least in the project, in a secure environment, for example. So that's really part of what the Data Factory will try to facilitate, even beyond the project, so kind of keep those data labs going even after the project is done. And then as part of that, and we haven't really done the pre-study yet, but we have a language data lab. And one part of that would also be starting the legal language data lab. And I think that's something really interesting, where we can, Peltarion is working with us on some of the other language data labs for authorities, for example, and medical language data, but this legal data could be a very interesting project that we could start up pretty soon and look into how we can work with language models for legal language. And as you mentioned before, Björn, that there is a lot of data. I mean, for the court system, for example, most of the data, or most of the cases, everything is public, right? All the old case law and everything. There's so much public data, so there's tons of text and cases that you can look into. It's just, is that a good quality? Is that something that we can use? And what do we need to do to make that accessible for AI, for example, and for different models? So those are interesting questions. And also what you mentioned before with, I think there's a discrepancy also with lawyers are usually not so technical, or maybe interested in technique, but there's early on in the education, or when you start deciding if you're going to be a lawyer or an engineer, right? It's not usually the same type of people. The people that tend to go to law are not specifically good at maths or physics, just generalizing here. But so I think there's also like a lack of competence of creating these solutions. There are some, tons of people who are great at law, but also being able to create these tools. That's where it's complicated to find the right competence and work together and create the tools. And also then, of course, the time, as you said, if so far not too many lawyers have found the time to make these efforts needed to create these tools.
I mean, within the IT industry, there's always been this dream, the cross-functional teams. That's how you create magic solutions. And I think, especially within AI, the cross-functional teams would be sort of the most important asset you can have to do this. But I was thinking on the data factory, who would be using this data set? Let's say you would actually have a year forward, and you would have these complete data sets that are sort of vetted for legal compliance and with license, etc. Who would be using them?
As a first step, for example, just like bringing in the data sets, etc., and seeing some use cases. I think, for example, the tax department, Skatteverket, would see a huge interest in developing these tools together with us and finding ways to use it. Also, the court system. But then I see rather also like smaller startups or other companies creating these tools. I think that would be the specific, they would be really interested in getting access to these kind of data sets and develop the tools that we are talking about right now, for example. They might have the technology and the knowledge of how to do it, but they don't have access to the data sets. So that's how I can see there could be a really interesting engagement with authorities, for example, and then also startups.
Yeah. So there might be, a lot of startups out there. It was just now, I wonder what kind of data they have. I mean, I want to do something. Is there any way to get a list of what data sets you're working on, or?
We are working on that right now. So we're actually kind of in the starting phase of building the library, and it's taken a little bit of time because there's something called GDPR, for example, that is putting some issues for us. So it's really the essence of the questions for some parts of the data sets, like how can we take them in, how can we handle them in a proper and compliant way within our organization, and then eventually share them with other organizations. So it's not very easy, but then of course we have also other data sets coming in without personal data, for example, that is easier to share, and where we have maybe the licensing issues and just need to take care of like the IPR questions, for example. But so within the coming year, we will have many data sets available. But at this moment right now, we have a few that are accessible. But we're really looking forward to having this process move forward, where we can offer a big variation of data sets. And we're looking or talking to our partners. We have very interesting partners that have huge data sets. For example, Lantmäteriet. Not really sure what they are called in English, but and other organizations like that have data lakes, for example, where we would like to see how we can merge their data lakes with our data factory, for example, and make that accessible in a different way and prepare, for example, the data set so it's more usable for AI projects. Sure. So that's what we're looking into and working on right now.
So just a follow-up question. Oh, sorry, Björn.
No,
yeah,
continue.
Just a follow-up question here about where it seems like you're working together with a lot of authorities. Do you also connect with other large companies or law firms to just get all of that kind of legal data that you need?
Right now, we're working together with both authorities and the lawyers within our corporates to work on the questions, first of all, to see how they can help us, or how we together can find, for example, guidelines on good ways of sharing data, for example. So that's one way that we work together with the cluster of lawyers that we actually have and the competence within our organization. And then eventually, for example, for the language data lab or the legal language data lab, that would definitely be one project or a data lab where we could bring in data sets that would be useful for these type of projects. So anyone who has ideas about this, please feel free to reach out to me and come with ideas, because we really want to do things that is useful. And I think the useful parts, usually you find that with someone having a problem or seeing a problem or actually seeing the solution. So that's where we are right now in this.
All right. I mean, it's super interesting, and I'm really looking forward sort of to the grand opening.
I mean, it's a pilot, so some parts are already going on. I mean, the compute and storage, for example, is in place, and we have some projects running on it, and also Peltarion is part of some of that. But then, of course, we are always adding on things and making it more accessible to all the partners.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an exciting sort of future ahead of us. And I mean, we're looking, everybody wants these cross-functional teams. You need the domain expertise, you need the technical expertise, you need legal expertise. I mean, what does this mean for the students of today? Can they count on their sort of traditional university degree to include all these skills? Lynn, I know this is it's a passion of yours.
Yes. So talking about the legal educational system, I think as I have experience both from the US and Sweden, I'm going to start focusing my attention on Swedish law schools. So here in Sweden, there is obviously the traditional law degree, and a lot of people also do a half year or 1 year abroad. However, there is very, very few courses or classes within AI, blockchain, smart contracts, and similar topics, to be honest. Whilst compared to, let's say, China or the US, there has been for many years AI and blockchain education for lawyers. So a couple of years back when I actually lived there and studied there, I was doing research for the UN within blockchain and AI already. And this was back in 2016, 17, something. So, I mean, moving back here, reviewing, law schools, I kind of found out that there is not that many universities that actually offers these types of classes. However, I just recently found out that this fall we will have 3 universities launching some kind of master class for AI specifically, which I'm very, very happy about. I myself have also a side project an initiative called Tech Academy Nordics, where we actually live stream and do webinars for Nordic law students to actually enhance tech literacy for the young generation or next generation of lawyers. So this is something that I'm truly passionate about. So hopefully we will see more legal tech and tech education for lawyers soon. And the way the development is going, it's really progressing within this area.
I can only agree to that, Lynn, what you said. I mean, the educations here in Sweden, at least, that's my only experience, and from France, actually. But there's really no tech involved, or at least not to a degree where you think that you'd feel sufficiently educated as a fresh student out of law school. And I think your initiative of doing that on the side, I think that's super valuable, because people who are interested in tech and law, they really have to find their own way of educating themselves. So it's really necessary to kind of build that into the education. There is one education here in Gothenburg called ICM, which is where they're merging engineers together with economy students and lawyers, and it's really focused on IP law. So that would be, the one thing I can think of where they get a bit more exposed to the tech side, but it's not necessarily tech as we talk about right now. So that's definitely something that's needed.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really interesting because these interdisciplinary classes, as you were saying, those are really rare in Sweden, but very, very common when you get abroad. I mean, in, Berkeley, Stanford, Harvard, to mention a few, I mean, this is every day for them, that they've been merged with classes in terms of business students, MBA students, with LLM students, and also with engineering schools. And they do pitches together, they do case law together, they do everything, which means that they are in a more interdisciplinary environment to start with or to begin with. And I think this is kind of where we need to bridge into in order to enhance the legal education. So just to give an example, Stockholm is one of the main startup capitals in Europe, and I feel like the legal education and the lawyers should also reflect that development. So I'm looking forward to new initiatives and to see more AI and blockchain in the curriculums going forward. We've really taken a big step in Sweden so far. But this can be even more enhanced to improve tech literacy here for lawyers.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, you would want to see some sort of broader collaboration between the sort of the more prominent schools in law and engineering and business and all this. We are. It's been fantastic. We are closing in on the end of this interview. There are a couple of minutes left. If there are things you wanna sort of bring up that I forgot to ask you about.
I wanna ask something, and I wanna add something as well. So I would like for me and Ebba to add some recommendations for podcasts, webinars, or anything else, because I really, really want to recommend something. If there are any lawyers or law students out there looking for more legal tech education, Bucerius Law School from Hamburg, they're live streaming online their entire curriculum this summer. This is a legal tech program that runs every summer in Hamburg. However, due to COVID, they're actually offering this for free. And this is something you have to pay for quite a big fee, I think, normally. So I really recommend, if there's anyone out there interested in legal tech this summer, to check out Bucerius Law School and their online course for legal tech, or program for legal tech this summer.
That's super tip. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, of promoting ourselves as AI Innovation of Sweden, I mean, coming up, we will definitely share a lot of the knowledge that we gain along the way and do webinars on these topics. I definitely think all students should attend Lynn's event. So you should tell us when it is, actually, so they know. And then just before that, also, encouraging students, for example, that may listen to this too, for their master thesis, for example, reach out to companies and reach out to us and ask if there's something that you can do your master thesis on together with us, because I think that's a great way of, starting off that trip to educate yourself and to find new ways and see what you can do with law, for example, because you don't have to go the traditional way. Look at me and Lynn, we've done some different routes after we had our law degree. So there's so many exciting things that you can do right now with law. It's an amazing time to explore and to change what law is and what we can do with it. So I think that's a great way of doing it. And then myself, I'm trying to educate myself by listening to, for example, some blockchain podcasts or AI podcasts and reading up on the side, because there's so much on these fields right now that you can learn from. And then hopefully eventually there are more podcasts or blogs like this where you can get a little bit of the intersection of these subjects.
I think you summarized it perfectly there. It's exciting times we have ahead of ourselves. I mean, it's been super inspirational discussion. I felt like we only sort of touched upon all these subjects, and we could probably continue this discussion for hours, in each of these topics. But time is running up, and I think we include all those tips in the key takeaways in the summary then. So probably easiest if you send them to me, so I will include them in a good form. And on that note, I think I'll say a super warm thank you to both of you. It's been great. I learned a lot, both from talking to you and also from researching this. I definitely know more about legal tech than before, and also super excited to see the progress of the data factory.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank
and
you
thank you for lifting this question. It's super important that we do progress here.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you so much.